Hey Untold Radio Network fans, want exclusive perks and to support our channel? Introducing our YouTube membership program with 3 amazing levels. Get loyalty badges that level up to different cryptids the longer you're a supporter. How cool is that? You'll also get access to custom Bigfoot emojis and priority in chat. Upgrade to Backstage Pass for exclusive wallpapers, photos, status updates, discounted books, and merchandise. Go all in with the producer level for everything mentioned plus member shoutouts. Ready for an enhanced experience? Join now, pick your membership level, and let's make this journey even more exciting together.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Well, good evening, all my fellow weirdos and weirdettes. Welcome to Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and as always, I'm so delighted that you've all joined me this evening. Or maybe you're not watching live on YouTube or Facebook or X. Maybe you've found us later on one of those platforms archived, or listening to us on one of the many audio podcast channels that the Talking Weird goes out of, as do all the other Untold Radio Network shows, which for any reason, should you only listen to Talking Weird, you should check out some of the other shows as well. There's something like a dozen other shows, and they're all fantastic. I'm really excited about my guest tonight, but first I want to chat a little bit about something else, because I always keep everybody posted on how The Shaver Mystery is doing, my short film, which is an extract from my upcoming feature about the man who invented flying saucers. And The Shaver Mystery is about what it sounds like, The Shaver Mystery. And I'm sure most of you watching the show now have heard me rant about The Shaver Mystery, so you know what it's about. If you don't know what it's about and you're interested in the weird, you definitely should. If you can't check out my film somewhere, you should, regardless, go and read one of Richard Toronto's books on Shaver and Palmer and The Shaver Mystery. You could probably start with War Over Lemuria, which is a fantastic book from Richard Toronto. It's one of the most unknown, probably, aspects of the development of paranormal belief. Without The Shaver Mystery, we probably wouldn't think the way we do about UFOs today. Anyway, the film, I always let people know what fest the film's getting into, and I was super happy to find out today that it was just accepted into the Northwest Flying Saucer Film Fest, which is part of the Cialis Flying Saucer Party, which I've just heard amazing things about. And the screening takes place on Friday, September 13, 6 p.m. at McFiller's Cialis Theatre. So if you're anywhere in the Washington, Seattle kind of area, I think it's a little ways from there, but not too far. Anyway, if you're in Washington State, you should try to go and check out my screening there, which I'd be very grateful if you did. I'm going to try to get there. It's not confirmed yet, but I will try to be there if I can be. Anyway, enough about The Shaver Mystery. I'd like to maybe chat a little bit about my guest, and more to the point, I'd love to chat to my guest, because he's such an interesting guy. He's a good friend of mine. He's also a longtime fan of history, both the kind they teach in school and the history they want kept hidden. He lives in a 116-year-old haunted home in Racine, Wisconsin, with his wife Barb, 4 Alaskan Malamutes, and a cat that controls his life. He is the producer of the film MILWAUKEE Mafia, Frank Balistrieri, and he is also the author of several books ranging from fiction through true crime and UFOs to gambling tips. His upcoming book about serial killers, Dark Minds, Bloody Hands, will soon be released by Edgeweaver Books. So I'm delighted to welcome back to Talking Weird my dear friend Wayne Clingman. So greetings, Wayne.
Hey, how you doing, sir?
Man, I'm doing great. It's so great to have you here. I'm so happy to have you back.
It's better to hear the great news about your film, sir. Very good luck. I really hope it goes far, sir.
Well, thank you. It's doing well. I had a nice screening this weekend in Portage County. Portage County, when I say this weekend, the weekend that just passed on Saturday night, Portage County is the county that Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver, the creators of the Shaver mystery, and who were both so responsible for so much about UFO lore, actually lived in. So it was wonderful to actually have a screening right there in their home county, which was amazing. But anyway, you've been busy, sir. You've been up to all kinds of things. I'm super excited about your upcoming book on serial killers. What's it called again? Dark Minds, Bloody Hands?
Bloody Hands, yes, sir.
Yeah.
We're looking at a few atypical serial killers that most people not really have heard of.
I like that.
And the idea is what makes them tick. And it's really interesting to say the least because serial killers, we all know the Ted Bundys in the world, the genuine cases in the world. Some of these people whose names I won't show you with because I can't pronounce my own name anymore. This is amazing people that killed many people. One may not kill anyone, but the rest of them killed a lot of people. And it's like, what got them going? What made them do these things? That's fascinating to me because we understand how people tick. Maybe we can do more to stop in the future.
I know one of the serial killers featured in the book who I knew nothing about before, actually being aware that he was going to be talked about in the book. And by the way, I haven't read it yet because it's not out yet. It's going to be released soon by Edgeweaver Books, right? It's coming out
yes,
soon.
Sir. So then either this week or next week, waiting for the cover art to be approved.
Oh, excellent. I mightn't flash up the artwork I downloaded then from the...
That's the wrong artwork is the new cover.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad I won't share it then. But tell us about one of the serial killers in that book, because again, this is somebody I never heard about. And what a crazy story this individual had. And I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but it's Jack Unterweger.
Oh, yeah. The guy from overseas, yeah. If I sound enthusiastic like I like the guy, I don't. It's interesting that you got the media attention. He used that media attention for his own purposes, be let out. And he came here, United States, and killed a lot of people. He victimized sex workers. When he was going to find them, he victimized them, killing them if he absolutely could. Perhaps he raped them before, even afterwards, as many serial killers like to do for some reason. And finally, he was found guilty yet again. He then killed himself. At the end of things, he killed himself. He's one of these people who preyed on other people because he wanted to. He blames his mother because he grew up poorly, grew up not in the best of home environments, but he used his hatred for his mother as a reason to kill.
And he murdered somebody initially, and he somehow kind of got away with it. He didn't get away with it. I think he went to prison, and then he presented himself as the model citizen or the model prisoner, and they let him out. And then he did most of his killings after the first time he'd been put away.
Right, and then when they caught him, when they had more than enough evidence to caught him, to catch him, he said it was police brutality. They were out to get him. He really wasn't the killer that he turned out to be. But by that time, they had a lot of evidence to link him to the crimes. There was no getting away from him.
Yeah, it's just such a disturbing story. It's always disturbing when somebody does something heinous and then gets let out, and then they haven't been actually re-socialized. They just go crazy and they do even more killings.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, now we have the Delphi killings going on with those 2 teenage girls that word. It's big people going to jail for that one. The Process Church might be still running amok. Who knows? We had the smiley face killer. If you can, I didn't have to do this book, but I have a copy. I've been on a show. He's been in mine before. The author's really good. If you want to learn about a killings that will really blow your mind, here you go. Smiley face killer. Yeah.
And were you going to? Have you written anything on that case yourself? Because I know you've talked about the smiley face killers to me a couple of times.
Recently came across. I mean, his work has been absolutely spectacular, as many people, because people like you and I find out what's going on. We find out what's going on with the case. We compare notes back and forth. We educate each other what's going on. We help law enforcement. We help each other stay safe, which I think is key, is staying safe.
There's I don't know much about the smiley face killers. I know that you know more, but maybe for those in the audience who know even less than me, can you give kind of a breakdown
Sure.
about what they're about?
The smaller face killings tend to be young men who disappear on bodies of water, like lacrosse, like Mississippi, right? Who then turn up 3 or 4 days later, drowned, right? Sometimes the symbol of the smaller face killer located near when the body's recovered. Sometimes these people found have date rape drugs within their system. And always this question's going on, how did this person leave the people they were with, then fell into a river? Why is it this guy went to a bar, was told he had too much to drink, then 4 days later he ends up dead? How does this stuff happen? Why are the lies told about what happened? I mean, that's a lot of things. What's troubling about the case is the number of times that the police department, especially in Austin, Texas, aren't coming out with the truth. You'd think they want us to know the truth so we can take the steps we need to take to stay safe. But it seems they don't care, or they're too scared of what people might do. I don't know. It's troubling to say the least.
Do you think it's because they there's kind of a backlash if there's the idea of a serial killer out there and they're unable to catch him? Do you have any idea why?
If a group of people are indeed killing these people and law enforcement can't catch them or won't catch them or whatever might be going on, yeah. If it was my community, it would be calling for heads. I'd be calling the head of the police department. Say, we want the police fired, police chief fired. I want the man to look into things. I want law enforcement to take care of me. Because at 66, nobody can kidnap me anytime soon, right? But that's not going to happen. But if, say, my son was running around here, went to a bar with his friends, I would hate to see him killed because he went to the wrong bar and someone spiked his drinks. This isn't Vegas. This isn't New York City. This isn't Milwaukee. You know, this is a small town. You think you can be safe going to a local bar and having a couple.
I've heard David Paulides mention the smiling face killers a number of times in his on his YouTube channel. I'm fascinated with all the Paulides stuff, the missing 411 stuff, and there are commonalities with other strange disappearances, like the fact, I think before you mentioned that there's often a body of water nearby, and they are found in that body of water often. The nearby body of water has correlates as well with the case profiles that David Paulides spent the last decade or more putting together. So it's definitely a weird mystery. Do you have any thoughts on the whole missing 411 Paulides stuff?
I'm fascinated by it too. I don't know what I don't know. Something's going on. What that something might be, don't know. But it's nice to be aware of it, because we can't do anything about anything unless we're aware of what's going on. So it's important that we do things like read the newspaper, watch the TV news, talk to our neighbors, get involved in neighborhood watch, so we understand what goes on within the community and take the appropriate action.
Yeah, it's interesting how there is that there's a weird segue between the paranormal and the idea of a serial killer there, because the smiley face killings, at least the type of presentation when people try to connect them, sound very much like either a serial killer or a gang of people or something being done by humans, right? But then there has those weird commonalities with missing 411. And from what I can tell now, and not even from what I can tell, I think it's fairly obvious for anybody who's been following Paulides, even including his last documentary was called Missing 411, the UFO Connection, and he talks about it all the time on his regular YouTube channel, is that he seems to suggest, not that the smiley face killings in particular, but that a lot of these strange disappearances are somehow linked with the UFO phenomenon.
Interesting you say that. I have to look at that with myself. I don't want to go off the deep end too badly, right? In my opinion, and I'm no expert, right? But when I look at the smiley face killing and the other things going on associated with it, I see the occult. Are there members of an occult group that, for whatever reason, are killing young men? You know, is what's going on with that?
Maybe there isn't, and now I'm being really weirdly hypothetical, but I can be with you and whoever's listening as well, I guess. But maybe if there is a connection, there could be a connection between occult behavior and paranormal activity. I mean, that's the whole
Absolutely.
point of occult activity, right? Occult activity, for people who would believe it and engaging it, are trying to
Summon
achieve something supernatural
Right.
or something with powers beyond the normal, right?
Right, absolutely. And maybe that's part of the deal. If we sacrifice Wayne, we get to have a new job. We get to get something, win the lottery, whatever it is that we might be looking for. And we're way more important than Wayne is. So let's get rid of Wayne. We know that he goes to Spar. Let's meet Wayne. We use Lisa as a way to get Wayne to have a drink or two. And then let's torture Wayne for a couple of weeks. We won't care. Nobody cares about Wayne anyway because he's a drunk anyhow. And he's a victim.
That's interesting, though, because I think that who knows what happens if there are targets of people who might be like homeless or undesirables. But so much of the Pilates stuff, it's weird because there's different kind of profile points regarding the victims. Sometimes they're people who have some kind of health issue or disability, or there's some reason you could imagine these people getting lost. But he also includes people who seem to be incredible individuals, like a lot of these young men, and this is where it ties into the smiley face killings, but in other missing 411 cases as well, there's often young men who are high performers academically, yes. They're super fit and athletic, and it's almost like something's picking them because of their competence.
If we go back into time, the people that were usually sacrificed probably didn't want to be sacrificed to begin with, but they were picked because they had abilities. They're young, they're athletic, they're good warriors. Maybe we sacrifice the POW who's really physically fit because that's what the DD wants. Because what DD wants, the old fat man, when you can have the young, virile guy instead. You know, we're cults that we would be doing.
That's interesting. I hadn't even thought of that connection, but you're right. It was always these super examples of, female virginity, or your ultimate, warrior of the caste who was pulled out, and because he was what you didn't want to give the gods your dross, you wanted to give your gods something special.
And why don't you use a prisoner of war? Because you use your local villager, they tend to get upset when you select their husband, their son, their cousin, right? They get upset. When you get a lot of prisoners of war, what are they going to do? Good point. There's very young children.
Yeah, Miss Mary, as Wayne just pointed out, said young children. And they, of course, have traditionally been part of the type of sacrifice law as well, in both folklore and also in various, older traditions. Obviously, giving your children to Moloch is something which comes to mind, but also in David Paulides. There's often the case in Missing 411 of little kids just disappearing and poof, they're gone, often never ever found again.
Yes.
And again, though, some of these are difficult to pin down whether it's a person or whether it's something paranormal, and I think that's why the Missing 411 remains such an enigma, because there are probably some cases where you go, well, maybe somebody got them, maybe an animal got them, but when you look at it, I'm very sympathetic to Paulides' work, actually, because when you look at it as a whole, there do seem to be the patterns that he suggests, and there does seem to be something very strange happening. It's always interesting, and maybe this is something you can talk about as well, it's always interesting when there's a geographic location where multiple people go missing.
Give me the ley lines. Let's go look up ley lines. What do they recommend? What are they suggesting? What are the dates these people be disappearing? Is the fact that Wayne might be disappeared for a week before they find him because he sacrificed literally the full moon, the new moon, or a quarter moon? These are pieces of puzzle that can be put together. The more we cover up the pieces of the puzzle, the longer we can keep it going. If the smiley face colors do exist, and I think they do, is it one group that's traveling the country, or is it a bunch of cells doing it, being coordinated by someone or something somehow? Look at the internet. What is all being done via the internet?
Are there theories about other than the kind of more way out there paranormal ones? Are there theories about who or what the smiley face killers might be? Like you mentioned then, is it a cell of people, or multiple cells? Is it a group that travels around? I haven't read the book that you showed up picked up before. I'm not that familiar with it, but are there popular theories about
Well,
what
it's the
this
other
thing
thing.
is?
People speculating because nobody knows, and it's easy to speculate to have conversations going on. In my opinion, when you look at the different smiley face killers, it suggests to me is a group of cells being controlled by a single group of individuals in charge. And they're doing it, in my opinion, again, this is speculation on my part, pure speculation. They're doing it for the paranormal part of it because they're trying to appease a god, a group of gods. Very much called like. And then, of course, we have to talk about people like the Protestant Church. We have to talk about Scientology. We have to talk about the Son of Sam killing. All kinds of different killing with these elements. And part of it gets really, really scary quickly.
Yeah, let's talk about Son of Sam quickly. That's interesting. Fill listeners in who might be aware of the type of occult significance or of that killer.
I'm just starting to look into Son of Sam. The biggest thing I'm aware of now is the number of occult locations near the killings that Son of Sam supposedly did. And the idea that one man committed all those murders, to me, is not credible. But again, when you look into certain cases like the Son of Sam, your life can go sideways in a heartbeat. Which brings up the question, why is that going on? Who's coming up for the real thing? Is it simply incompetence? Who knows? But something to be aware of.
Have you looked at the Zodiac Killer in any of your work or research?
No, I've not looked at Zodiac Killer. No. Next thing, if I had the time, it would be the Son of Sam. But again, I don't know what I don't know, and I don't want to screw things up. To me, it's too important not to do that. To me, it's easy. To me, if I had the resources, which I do not have, I look into the Protestant Church and Heartbeat. The guy that's helping me do the Buffalo Mafia, right? He really wants to do the Protestant Church like there's no tomorrow. But he freely admits himself, before he would do that, he would want to get carry concealed weapons permit and get some burner phones. Because he's concerned about his well-being looking at the Protestant Church.
Gosh, well, I guess we shouldn't be defamatory of any new religious order out there, because I assume that we don't really know what goes on or what doesn't go on.
The Protestant Church, as it was given to us back in the 70s and 80s, no longer exists.
Okay, I didn't know if the Protestant Church was still out there.
Well, it depends on what you believe. I mean, you can go down that rabbit hole. Some people says it went away. It's an animal shelter in Utah. Some people say, oh, no, they're still doing this, what they're doing. Who knows what's going on? But what we need to do is, again, read the news, read the information that's out there, make our own decisions.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Son of Sam still. So David Berkowitz is the killer in that case. Correct. But he claimed to be part of some, I don't know if occult conspiracy is accurate, but he claimed that he was like having communications with this demonic black dog that talked to him that belonged to his neighbor, right?
Right. He's born again. I don't think he's ever going to get out of prison. Well, they don't let him out of prison. But he's born again. He'll talk about his life. He'll talk about why he converted and those things. He will not talk about his crimes at all. I don't blame him for that one, right? But there's people like to know, individuals looking at Son of Sam today, right? The Ultimate Evil, like to know why that book, I believe I pronounced the name correctly, has gone through 4 or 5 printings, and each one, information is more and more pulled out of it. Why would you do that? When people have those questions, people like to know those questions, his connections, to other occult individuals. Was he connected to anybody who was part of the stuff of the Crowley was brought to the United States? These are questions that people have. Will ever be answered? Who knows? Because David's not going to answer them.
It's always interesting, those serial killers who aren't put to death or aren't killed by other inmates, who have an ongoing, like Ed Gein's a classic example, speaking of Wisconsin. Like Ed Gein lived for quite some time after he was arrested and put in a mental home or an institution or whatever the politically correct term is.
He was put away in a location that was never going to hurt anybody again, and they'd help him, treat him, they would do that, right? when growing up in school, he was the demon. He's the boogeyman. If you don't go to bed and behave, Wayne, Ed Gein's going to get you.
Well, because you're from Wisconsin, and Plainfield's not that far from where I am. Actually, I
No,
bumped
that's
into.
where I grew up.
Yeah,
I grew up
well,
in
that's
Berlin,
right.
I
You were
think.
closer to there then, probably.
Yeah. I mean, things go on in time. I mean, the idea, Ed Gein's story, his real story versus what the media would like us to believe, is so far apart. But again, you don't make movies telling the truth. You make movies with maybe a little bit of kernel of truth, and the rest of it is what it takes to get that young kid in the street, pay $10 to watch the movie.
Well, yeah, it wasn't as gruesome as Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but we're still. I think the thing is, A, it was so macabre, but B, it was in, like, literally around here, small town, rural America, where everybody knew everybody, and then you find out that old Ed is been digging up graves, making sausage out of body parts, and has been living in this house in absolute squalor with furniture made out of human remains and things. I mean, for a small town, I think that spectre still haunts Plainfield, to be honest.
I think you're correct. Same thing in Milwaukee. Milwaukee is a larger town, but you go to the area that guy Kent Dahmer hung out in. At certain times at night, people look behind their back more often. They don't know what's going to happen to them next.
I bet they do. They're two very interesting, almost comparison cases. I always think about when I think about them in Wisconsin, because you have Dahmer, who's, in a way, his killings are the product of a big city. Like, that would have been inconceivable that he could have behaved the way he did in small town America. For example, when one of his kidnapped victims ran away and told the police, half drugged, they dragged him back to Gein, and they thought they were having a lover's spat, and they handed him back over to Gein. Now, that wouldn't have happened in small town America, but at the same time, Gein perhaps got away with what he got away with because he was so removed from the rest of the community. You know what I mean? He could do his stuff in his farm. He could run around nude in his flesh suits at night. So I better be careful what I'm saying because it's a family show. But my point is that Gein could. They're both products almost of their environment. They're very different serial killers. Although some people say Gein isn't really a serial killer because maybe he only killed once or twice, and there's a debate. Maybe he killed as many as 3 times, but. Regardless, he's put in that same camp, but Gein's very much a product of his rural environment, and Dahmer's very much a product, I think, of his urban environment, right?
Correct. The idea, what people forget when it comes to Dahmer is when the police, who should never release that young man back to him, were working long shifts at that time, and it's my understanding they're working long shifts, that they were told by dispatch to go to case as soon as they could. So it's maybe sticking around longer to see what was really going on and saying, "Oh, this lover spat. Have a nice day."
And there's probably is that lack of, I'm assuming, in urban policing, that you don't have that knowledge of the person that you're dealing with. It's just at 2 more anonymous faces. You're right. It's a long shift. Whatever. This is easier just to let's get out of here. But in rural policing, like in a small town, the police know literally everybody. If they went out and there was a domestic violence dispute with Ed Gein and somebody he said was his younger male lover, the police probably wouldn't have been so just, okay, we're just going to hand you up. This is just another crazy night in Milwaukee or another crazy afternoon in Milwaukee.
It would never happen in Berwick, Wisconsin. The cops would have found out more about the young man, found out how old he was. If found out, he would say, I forget the kid was over 18 or not. But it was like, you juvenile, they brought him home. They're not allowing him back with Ed Gein, not Ed Gein, Dahmer. That never would have happened. Police failed. The supervision of the Milwaukee Police Department was less than admirable.
We had a point, just to change the topic for a minute, from Nixon, and that's, I always probably mispronounce the name.
Yeah, there you go. Yes, they did.
Skin. They found another young man in Lady Bird Lake in the past week or so. Do you know anything about that, Wayne?
I do. Austin's one part, like by Austin, they keep people finding it. Interesting too about Austin, among Austin and Nashville, is they've searched these places before thoroughly. They never found anything there. They come back 3 or 4 days later. Oh, there's Joe floating in the lake again. Oh, there's Wayne. And Wayne looks like he's pretty dry for a person we found in the lake. Why does that Wayne have water in his lungs? Why is Wayne full of drugs? You know, why is Wayne being called a drunk when he hasn't had a drink in 30 years? Things that the smiley face killings is getting more and more known for is law enforcement seeming to draft the ball. The question is, why are they drafting the ball? Are there that many incompetent police departments in the world? Don't know.
It's interesting because then you can almost start viewing it through a conspiratorial lens. Or
People do, especially in Austin. People do. As people look at Austin, who the police department, who is running the police department, who they're connected to, what companies they're connected to, it gets really weird in a heartbeat.
So what was your other research you were talking about a little bit before the show?
Oh, sure.
I found that fairly fat. This is shifting gears again a little bit, but
Radical shift. I live near the Rock River in the state of Wisconsin. The Rock River runs from northern Wisconsin into Illinois, where it empties into Mississippi. Along the Rock River in Wisconsin, there's a state park. I'm just going to pronounce the state park's name now. It's called Alaskan State Park. Alaskan State Park is famous for having 2 or 3 mounds that the Indians back in the day built. It's also interesting because the Indians living in that mountain society were driven away by other Native American tribes in around the year 1200. They don't know why. It's my understanding, and I'm looking for the documented proof that they found human bones with teeth marks and Azalan. Now that's interesting because cannibalism has happened with Native American tribes, but more in Canada and out east than this area of the United States. Things happen, however, for lots of different reasons. Were those Indians part of the Mississippian tribes practicing cannibalism for whatever reason? Were there perhaps contactees or contacted, influenced by the Aztecs? Don't know. Were they in fact Aztecs? Because you can take the Rock River all the way to the Mississippi, take the Mississippi River all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. The big river system.
And isn't there some, I think I've heard some theory that Azalan was meant to be like one of the names for the mythical city that the Aztecs came from, or was related to Aztec lore in some capacity, the actual name of that place?
See, I don't know about that. The only thing I can tell you, it's interesting that if the Indians were indeed cannibals, that tribes were actually cannibals, right? Were they cannibals because of lack of food? Were they making chum from their victims to harvest fish from the Rock River? Or perhaps, are you familiar with what a sturgeon looks like? Dean?
It's a big fish, I think, right?
It's huge.
Yeah.
The fishes now get bigger than I am tall, over 6 feet. Back in the day, before we polluted the Rock River badly, before they cleaned it up and the like, it was famous for the large sturgeons that they had back in the days of the American Revolution. Could, in fact, this tribe, for whatever reason, worshiping a huge sturgeons, use chum to summon them? Let's go a little bit further down the river to Lake Mills. Lake Mills has a reputation of back in the day, 1850s, 1860s, of people seeing something in the river, some monster, so to speak. Now,
was this in pre-Columbian times, or this is since?
I understand the last one that saw it in 1850.
Oh, okay.
Now, it could be people could be still seeing them there. I'm unaware of that. However, there are also rumored to be in the depths of Lake Mills temples, flooded temples because the river rises, built whenever. The idea would be, are the temples there? If they are there, what are they used for? Were they worship, places of worship, grain storage, places to gather, do whatever that you want to do in your local area? Don't know. But it's fascinating that also Lake Mills, the Rock River can be as deep as 50 feet deep in places.
Wow. For
yards, hundreds of yards can be 50 feet deep. What lives in the water 50 feet deep? Where a carp could easily live there, a guard could easily live there. Could a sturgeon live there? Eat garbage fish, eat fowl, eat dead fish, eat whatever. Sure. Could it get hungry enough to come to shoreline and get a cow, get a deer, get a cat, or get a dog? Sure, it could. It'd be fascinating to see what might be there. And I'm undertaking research to find out if I can find out more information and perhaps come up with a couple theories of what might be going on.
I know to the south of here, and I'm sure you're aware of it, is a lake called Devil's Lake. And
Yes, I'm from Devil's Lake.
yeah, and there were apparently there was a pre-Columbian tradition or a Native American tradition that there was a creature in Devil's Lake, right? Like that was.
Well, I grew up in Myrtle. Right?
Okay, so you're right near it then, because yeah, it's right. It's in Barb, right on the
physically
outskirts.
grew up close enough to Devil's Lake that we could walk there in the summer, right?
Huh.
The first time I heard that being said was within the last 2 years. Someone claimed about this creature in Devil's Lake. Now, it doesn't mean it's not true. It means I never heard that story.
Oh, interesting.
Also,
So the locals didn't know about it at all when you were in that area.
When I was growing up. Now, interesting too, talking about Barbu, we lived near the Barbu Bluffs, which was quarried or quartz, right? First time I ever heard about anything weird going on at Barbu Bluffs was recently. I mean, I had relatives that worked the bluffs. But mind you, they're a bunch of drunks. If anybody can be, trust me when I say they're a bunch of drunks. If anybody can be influenced about stories, would be my relatives. You give them a good story, half drunk, they come home with that story. So I don't know what's going on. I'm saying it's interesting that people. I've heard these stories recently. Doesn't mean they happened. They didn't happen. I'm just saying it's interesting that I only heard about them in the last couple of years.
So there are Barb. I don't know if I've heard any. I certainly have heard the Devil's Lake story because I read it in a Linda Godfrey book. I think in Weird, Wisconsin. I think that's where I read it first. But what's the story of Baraboo Bluffs? I don't know if I'm.
Baraboo Bluffs is the Baraboo Bluff Range that circles the city of Baraboo, Wisconsin. There's Baraboo's on the top of the Bluff Range. The Badger Ammunition Plant is the bottom of the range near the Baraboo River. I think Wisconsin River flows through there too. It's an interesting, beautiful area. It's a great area to go. Our good friend, I love craft friend, August Earlith, grew up near there. You know, and he ever reading, trying to remember his books he wrote about that area of the countryside.
The Sauk Prairie Saga books that he wrote, yeah.
Right. I mean, he doesn't mention that at all. But again, not everybody is aware of the different rumors and myths that might actually go on. So I'm not trying to denounce anyone else for being fake or anything and saying, it's just news to me. And I don't know everything. Trust me when I say that.
It is interesting, though, that you never... Because, I mean, I assume the Devil's Lake story was an old story because I read it in, like I said, again, I think in Weird, Wisconsin. But that said, maybe this is something which has become popularized in recent times. Of course, there's also an increased interest in the weird and the paranormal. So people go out there and try to dig up every story they can find. So...
Well, we were going to do a book on the Driftless area near Richmond Center because there's an old man, older than I am. I'm 66, so he's been in the 70s. He used to tell stories about seeing things in the Driftless area of Wisconsin. Turns out that he was an old man telling stories to entertain his friends. That happens. Kind of like the whole day.
Because that's become famous. Like the Driftless area is known as a paranormal hotspot now.
It could be. I mean, I'm not aware. During the research we did today, we went to do that book. We didn't find any credible paranormal. We could find stuff that bootleggers used to come up that way to the Wisconsin River because it's a close cave system in case they want to get away from the police, take shelter from the storms and all like that, a frequent area. Then you go in the cave structure. Eagle, Wisconsin has a big cave. The Wiccans used to run like this down around the area. God, they're working thick as thieves in the area. And Gotham, Eagle, oh yeah, I should know. I was one of them.
So, but I was gonna segue into the Driftless area, but I haven't on the show before. Maybe we should segue into that. So what did the Wiccans do there? Tell me about.
Well, the Wiccan group I was associated with had yearly festivals in Eagle Cave area, the Gotham, Wisconsin area. And when I say festivals, I mean, no disrespect, right?
So don't forget it's a family show, so I can only imagine, so be careful what we say.
And again, I mean, no disrespect is my experience at that time. I was a big drunk, okay? I liked those festivals because I could get drunk from the moment I was there to the moment I left. Other people liked being there because they could get drunk or an hour high from the moment they got there to the moment they left.
And just to qualify too, you've been sober for like 30 years now too, or
I've
something.
been sober longer than I've been drunk.
Gotcha.
Thank God. But I remember these days family. I remember getting there, getting drunk, and looking for other drunks. You know, that became the people I would drink with, hang out with, that place to party, right?
So you think that those Wiccan events then were as much a social gathering for people to let down their hair as it was an actual religious event?
Well, they would have circles, right? But as this quote, if I forget where I read it from, but the quote basically goes, 90% of the people involved with the occult are looking for an excuse to get naked and dance. It's the 10% who aren't into that are the troublemakers, the ones to be aware of, right? Because no one that I was partying with would do more than get drunk and find an excuse to get naked and dance.
Just don't, again, family show, so we have to be careful before we go any further.
I'm thinking pretty safe. No harm, no foul. If it was over 18, stuff like that, right? I can't think if people are involved in the other 10%. I just can't think of it. That would have been said, hey, you ever have these beliefs, but not here. I mean, that was well policed.
I've heard of covens in this area as well.
Oh, yeah.
Like I've heard of people on deserted farms where there are barns and things, literally having what you would see in like a 1970s folk horror movie, fires and the type of dancing at night that anybody who's, watched something like the Wicca Man, maybe not the sacrificing the person in the cage, but the whole kind of Wiccan type ceremony.
Give me a good Celtic festival. What we got coming up? We got back with Lammas, was this in August? I forget the one that's then going to be in September for the solstice. There'll be a Harry Pagan holiday. Euro would be another. Samhain, Halloween would be huge. I will guarantee you this. In the state of Wisconsin, within 50 miles of where you live, Dean, within 5 miles where I live here in Racine, Wisconsin, there will be Wiccan ceremonies and Samhain with people drunk and dancing naked, without a doubt. But again, just like I can think of any other religious ceremonies and many, many other religions that kind of have the same thing, but maybe not so much nudity, but let's find an excuse to party.
Do you think these things are ever effective in a paranormal result, like in summoning something?
Yes, absolutely. Remember Parsons, Jack Parsons?
Yeah.
I would think that Jack Parsons brought something up that was unable to put away. I think that something probably helped get him killed. I think that something still lives in the Hollywood, California area and looks for sacrifices. I think many times these sacrifices tend to be young female and male movie stars looking to make it big. I think that many movies are made famous because they trade off for that ability.
It's interesting there's an idea of sometimes historical magical workings gone wrong, resulting in long-term psychic effects like the one, or supernatural effects like the one you just spoke of. But I know one of the theories about the Loch Ness Monster is that Aleister Crowley had a residence on the shores of Loch Ness in the 19-teens. This is before now there'd been reports of the Loch Ness Monster throughout history, allegedly, but it became really popular in the 1920s onwards, right? It became a thing. And supposedly Crowley was doing all kinds of workings there, supposedly. And there's stories of him after it had happened, him dragging things down to the loch to throw them in. Not people, but like, sheep bodies and things to feed to whatever he'd summoned. So I don't know whether I believe the story or not, but it would certainly be fascinating if the modern apparitions and appearances of the Loch Ness Monster were the result of a magical working by Aleister Crowley gone wrong or gone right, depending upon how you look at it. And now there's been, close to 100 years of monster sightings because of it.
Well, to me, you can bring something up. If you bring something up, you better be able to put it back away. I find, in my opinion, that drunks are very, very poor at putting things back. Very good at calling things up because, in my opinion, it feeds on that energy, right? But they don't have the skill set to put it away. Everybody thinks that they can, but they can't. And you can get very scary. Yeah, right, Flat. And you can get very scary in a quick hurry if you read Aleister Crowley's books and you follow his instructions. I would recommend you don't.
Yeah, there's a danger, I think, as you just mentioned, Flat Rockland, for our listeners, just said good luck putting it back. I do think it's, regardless of the supernatural reality of any of these things we're talking about, I do think that people can get involved in practices that they don't understand. And the psychological effect itself, presumably, if you're not prepared to deal with it, can be fairly impactful. And then let's go to the next stage, that if there is some genuine other that people are somehow interacting with or summoning when they do any type of ritual work, I wonder how many people actually have the occult background or understanding to actually deal with these things when they're interacting with them. Just to pick up a book and then to fool around. Oh, I can understand. It seems to me to just be madness on a couple of levels. On the psychological level, that it might literally be madness, but even more scarily, if it's not just a psychological issue, if you do bring something up, how on earth is this other going to be dealt with?
Well, here you go. I mean, have you read any of the old sagas from Iceland?
From who, sorry?
The sagas
from Iceland. Yeah, I'm conscious of them, yeah.
Have you read the one that called Eagle Saga?
I'm aware of it. I don't know if I've read it, but I am aware of it, yeah.
In that book, the hero, Eagle, runs his big thing. He runs around the island all the time. But he's also running on these homes where he finds that people have used runes to try to make people fall in love with them. They did it wrong. He has to spend time getting rid of the ruins because instead of making someone fall in love or doing whatever they want them to do, they've gotten someone really, really sick. It's easy to do. People today, I'll get in my soapbox time. People here today don't understand the ruins. They see a ruin. We don't mean the swastika, right? That's really not really ruin. But they see even the simple types of ruins that the Viking warriors wore in their helmets for good luck. And they think that's some type of demonology symbol. No, they're not. But it's easier to ignore it or to make something up than take the time to research. That's why researching is key. That's why your show is key, because I have so many interesting guests who help us down that path.
Well, you're certainly one of those interesting guests, Wayne. I have my own weird little story about opening something and then it not being able to be put back in the box. Nothing that I did, but something I certainly experienced. When I was visiting Atlanta many years ago, I didn't live in America then, I was just here on a long trip. I met some people at a bar around Halloween, and I ended up going and staying with them in their home. I was on a 6-month visa, so I could stay in America for quite some time. So I went and ended up living in their home for a while, and one of them moved out, and I was able to stay in his room. And he'd painted the walls, the ceiling, the floor, and the kind of walk-in wardrobe, which was the only furniture left, all of it black, like it was entirely black. And on the walls, there was ritualistic chalk markings. And I just moved into the room. I was grateful to have somewhere to hang out with, in the suburbs of Atlanta. I was young. I was in my 20s. I was partying. I was having fun. And one night, and even though he didn't live there still, he was still part of the group, so we still associated with him. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night. The room seemed to be illuminated by a faint blue light source, even though there wasn't one. And I rose from the bed I was sleeping in, almost like my feet were hinged to a board and there was a board underneath me. It felt like that. It was like I rose up, not straight up, but I rose up on a weird angle. like again, like I was lying on a board that had a hinge at my feet, and then it started going up, and I panicked, I guess. I got a real terrible fright, and then I realized I was out of my body, and then I backed back into my body, and I sat up in the physical state, and the room was still the same, but it didn't have the weird blue glow, and I was very conscious that something weird had happened. I do think it was a genuine out-of-body experience. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt very, very real. The room looked exactly right except for this blue faint glow. Anyway, I happened to mention it to the guy who used to live in the room the next time I saw him, because he was actually a occult practitioner, and another guy who lived in the house was a member of the Ordo Temple Orientis. So they were essentially an occult household. I wasn't an occultist. I just ended up hanging out with these people. And he said, man, you got to go back and you got to wipe off all those things I left on the wall. That's the way that's happening to you. I should have wiped them off before I left. So I do think that that's a classic example of something being done and then not gotten rid of, and then the result was me having an out-of-body experience. I'm glad that's all that happened. And I do think that was a genuine, I don't think it was just some psychologically induced dream state. It felt very, very real.
Makes sense to me, sir. It's just, people do weird things. They do. I could tell stories about weird people doing weird things, thinking they're getting over, using the magic system that they had. Basically, most of the time, they're just using the power of persuasion to make people believe something was not true. But again, they're using their ability to talk BS to make someone do something that normally they would not do. You know, it's weird what people are willing to do to make someone do something they weren't willing to do in the first place.
Well, it's a weird world, as you and I are both very aware of. Tell me a little bit about Dreamweaver books, because I had Edgeweaver books.
Thank you.
Edgeweaver books. I misspoke. So Edgeweaver books, because I've looked at some, because I knew your book was coming out, so I became quite interested in the house. I looked at them. They have some really cool looking books, by the way.
Thank you. I'm going to pass that on to the boss. Edgeweaver Books is a recently started publishing company. As you can tell, they've done a lot of stuff publishing old classics like the Sherlock Holmes, Lovecraft, and the like, right? The idea is to introduce these books to a new audience and also encourage authors willing to write action-oriented books for the younger male audience to have a place to publish their books, right? One of books like the old Penetrator series books, the old Lost World books, the old Lovecraft storyline type idea of men can be men fighting the evil. Men can be men helping the family out, like Shane. Men can do whatever they need to do. The challenge is, what can I do to prevent the bad from happening? What can I do to help turn things around? And these are the types of books that Edgeweaver would like to be part of.
And they're also clearly doing nonfiction as well, because a lot of the books I saw there were fiction, but they're doing your serial killer book, which is being released.
And they're doing a book by my friend Leo Silva, who was a retired DEA agent, and they're going to publish his book on his career in Mexico fighting the Zetas. And if you want a book that's action-oriented, where people are standing up against great evil, that's the book to read. To see what the Zeta group does to Mexicans, and the horrific things they do to children, will make your stomach churn.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Are we going to see any of your UFO books or any of your more paranormal books on the Edgeweaver imprint, do you think?
I think we'll see. Good question. We might see the Rack River one. The Rack River one will take money to research it, because one thing, it used to be you could get information from the University of Wisconsin system if you're a resident of the state. That seems to have changed. I may have to do whatever, maybe take a class so I can get access to libraries. Don't know yet. I haven't looked into it deep enough yet. That'll be a cost. The cost of there's a couple of magazines I get subscriptions to, so I can get more up-to-date information. It'd be perfect in my perfect world to go to Lake Mills to see what's in the bottom, if those temples really do exist. But if I remember correctly, there's a dissertation that was written about what was in the bottom, like Mills. If I can find that, that would be a godsend. Or how big the sturgeons get. And to do that, we're going to go into an artificial lure line. And we're calling the deep ones. After our good friend Lovecraft, right? Because what perfection thing would fit well Lovecraft-based unofficial lures to be used to fund research of what's in the bottom of the Rock River, what's in the bottom of Lake Mills, what the heck is going on at Aslan.
That sounds
It won't
fun.
be cheap, and this is something fun that people can do to support. We'll start into that endeavor. Because researching, as you well know, sir, is not cheap.
No, that's true. So will you do like a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo?
No, it's simply we'll create a page where it won't be GoFundMe, but something really, really basic. Where that your fisherman spend $10 and get a lure. Maybe a Patreon where we get the $10 level each month to get a lure, or each $25 to get a lure. You're a fisherman, that'll be fun. We'll do a T-shirt, get something that look deepish, some cool type looking thing of selling bait in Smith, right? Something fun. Because the idea is trying to educate the readers at the same time enjoy the experience.
And that'll go through Edgeweaver, or will you do that independently?
No, that'll be something I do on my own. That makes me funny. Because I mean, yeah, something. I mean, I could go to the leadership and do something like that, and they might help me out. But they're it's a small new publisher. I want them to save that money to support what you're doing up there in northern Wisconsin and other things, and let me see what I can raise on my own. Let's see what happens.
Some of the covers of those books as well. Where, for people listening, where do they go to the Edgeweaver site? I don't have it in front of me. It's like Edgeweaver.
I don't have it in front of me either. I think it's edgeweaverbooks.com.
I know there's definitely a Facebook site because I was looking at it before.
Facebook and Twitter.
Before I did, it's just Edgeweaver Books on Facebook. But it's also edgeweaverbooks.com. I love the artwork on the books. I love how the covers all kind of thematically similar. Like if you had a set of the books, which was cool. I thought.
And we try to use humans as human-generated art is very, very expensive quickly, but at least we're trying to use humans to do the covers as much as possible. And we got other things going on. We're working on one of the coolest games you would absolutely die to play. That's all I can say. Is absolutely would die to play.
Oh, wow.
It is fun on so many levels. It's fun on the historic level. It's fun, very much fun on the what if level, and it's cool as shit because it also goes back to UFO history, something I'm looking at doing because there's so much information in the public domain about the UFOs, the early days into the investigations, who was doing what, how that might have been all perverted, who might have actually perverted it. And most of it's in the public domain. We just have to look for it.
Well, you don't want to spill too much, but I know that you've got you're also researching a Blue Book type book at the moment, right?
What book?
You're also researching a book on Blue Book and those early.
Operation Blue Book Project.
Yeah.
I forget what was named. There should be 3 of them. There'll be one book combining the first 2 that then morphed into Blue Book.
Sign, then Grudge, then Blue Book.
Right. We merged in the Blue Book. I think we'll be doing something on what may have happened with Rockwell, the crash. What that whole thing was about, because that's when things started getting weird. When did the Men in Black first show up? Why did they do what they do? I mean, that whole thing is fascinating. And why is it, in my opinion, so many of the early researchers go down that rabbit hole and don't come back sane?
And that alone is like a Lovecraft story, where the protagonists always end up mad.
It's absolutely crazy stuff, sir.
Well, I know you used to have books available through other publishers. Can people still get all your books moving over to your new publisher?
You can get all my books. You can get my books. You get expanded illustrated editions of the Milwaukee Mob, the Buffalo Mob, and Critical Blast. You get all my basic versions of all those books on Amazon. If you're looking for a low cost spend and interested in the Mafia, get them on Amazon. Get the Milwaukee Mob, the Milwaukee Mafia, Frank Pelletary. and get Buffalo Mob on Amazon. That's your cheapest spend. If you want something, you can put in your pocket. You can go to Critical Blast and get that. If you want something.
What was that website? Sorry, say that one again.
Critical Blast.
Is that criticalblast.com or?
Criticalblast.com will get you there. If you're looking for something that looks like a graphic novel that will take a bullet, they have them too. Again, printing books is expensive. But if you don't have a lot of money, and people don't right now for whatever reason, you want to get something inexpensive, go to Amazon, you get the basic ones. If you want something solid, if you like the graphic novel type stuff, go to Critical Blast and get the hardcovers.
Well, excellent, man. It was so great to have you here. I just want to thank you for coming back to Talking
pleasure.
Weird. I always love chatting with you.
I love chatting with you too, especially when I can relive my days of running with Wiccans.
Well, on that cheery note, until I talk to you again, Wayne, and until I talk to everybody else out there, please keep it weird.
Bye.